Okay, I think
We are live now on the YouTube channel and we'll start also recording and ready.
Thank you so much, Belayo. I just want to see, I think we are all ready to start. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good day. Welcome to this event, the COP26 event on Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs and Climate Change, Learning and Practice Opportunities, which is being held today in a hybrid format with speakers and participants connected virtually via Zoom and also live streams through YouTube, and also with some of you attending in person at the SDG Pavilion at COP26. So my name is Nayara Costa. I'm a Senior Sustainable Development Officer at the Division for Sustainable Development Goals at UNDESA, and I'm pleased to facilitate this session together with our partners from UNITAR. Our focus today is on learning opportunities on the intersections between climate change and SDG implementation. We will also have the opportunity of participating in a climate classroom led by our partners from UNITAR. Before we begin, I would like to provide some housekeeping announcements. As you see, the webinar is being recorded, and the link to the recording, as well as any PowerPoint presentations and additional materials, will be shared soon and posted at our website, the events website. Participants are encouraged to use the chat and Q&A boxes to make comments throughout the session. We will be monitoring the chat and we will be trying to accommodate your inputs during the Q&A segments. Please, whenever you use the chat box, remember to indicate your name, your organization, the country where you are based, followed by your questions and suggestions. For our colleagues attending in person, you will be able to raise your hand and we will be also granting you the floor so you can comment and participate. If you are tweeting about this webinar, you can tag us at SustDev and at UNITAR, or you can use the hashtag SDGPavilion. Summary of this webinar will also be prepared and add to the events page. So without further ado, let's start with our very high-level welcoming remarks. I have the honor to invite Mr. Nikhil Seth, United Nations Assistant Secretary General and Executive Director of UNITAR, for his opening remarks. Mr. Seth, please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Naira, and welcome to all of you, those who are in the SDG Pavilion in Glasgow at COP26, and those who are joining from all over the world on Zoom and other platforms. And it's good to see all the panelists, and it's good to see you, Lotta, online too. I am, of course, been hearing about what's happening in Glasgow, and I'm very happy that there is moderate progress being reported from across the board. And I'm also very happy, I must confess, to see the anger of young people spilling into the streets all over the world and in Glasgow. It's a good sign to see that everyone is feeling so passionately and actively about what is happening around us and protesting. That's a good start to make things happen and take action. And I also like the way the presidency has organized the days, the thematic days in which this conference is taking place. And I counted there are as many typically SDG issues as there are climate issues. So at the end, it's a recognition of the fact that the SDGs and climate change are really part and parcel of the same things we hope to see for humanity and a better world for all. I just wanted to recall that, in June 1992, two things happened at the same time. One, Agenda 21 was signed off on, and two, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change was also signed off at the same time. But in the way they've evolved since 1992, both have followed kind of parallel tracks. Agenda 21 morphed into several things. Then you had a conference in Johannesburg. Then it became the MDGs in a way, and then the SDGs, and focused on many of the kinds of issues you all are familiar with, which are part of the SDGs, which are there on that banner in the SDG Pavilion. The climate change process had its own track, and it morphed into various things, including the Kyoto Protocol and lots of COPs before we had Paris. And now, of course, the high-profile activity that we are seeing in COP26. So, unfortunately, this has happened because I do feel that many of the issues in and around the SDGs are much more human-centered. They are much easier to capture the political imagination and the hopes and dreams and aspirations and fears of human beings, while the COPs have focused a lot on greenhouse gases, on mitigation, on adaptation. Of course, that's all very important. But the political appeal of many of the SDGs, because they focus around human issues, is much greater. And I was just thinking that if you look at the political manifestos of five political parties fighting elections, and regardless of which side of the spectrum they come from, left, center, right, the SDGs could give them the ammunition to prepare their election manifestos. So that's because the SDGs are so much closer to the heart of people. And implementing the SDGs and doing the types of actions there, whether it's for hunger or sustainable agriculture or sustainable infrastructure or water or energy for all, or protecting our marine ecosystems, or preserving our terrestrial ecosystems, or even the goal 13 on climate change, or as the sustainable cities, all that, if implemented sincerely, and if we get to the goals and targets, we'd actually be implementing any ambition that you can envisage in the Climate Change Convention. So a full and complete implementation of the SDGs actually would go a long way to meeting the temperature goals that are being set in the context of climate change. So I think it's necessary for us to realize the political cachet and the importance of focusing on the SDG kinds of issues for realizing all that we can want out of COP26 and the further actions to realize climate change. We are caught in a global health crisis, and we are seeing an increase in extreme poverty, and we are also seeing the rise in greenhouse gases, despite the commitments and promises that are being made all around us. All these are crucially linked, that without more ambition on climate, the world community may not have the ability to reach the goals of anything, whether it's the SDGs or the climate change. We need sustainable agriculture for our water scarce world. We need, as I was mentioning, sustainable energy for all. We need sustainable cities. We need to meet all our goals on SDGs if we are to achieve our climate ambition. And as we think through these interlinked challenges, both in the climate process and the SDG process, we have an unprecedented opportunity to raise our ambitions, to leave no one behind through effective actions, and to accelerate progress on the 2030 agenda. It is with this kind of background that we sat together with DESA, and DESA is very well represented today, to think through how our learning and training could twin the SDGs and climate change in ways that people can understand and relate to the climate agenda much better. UNITAR, we seek to change people's behavior and attitudes through learning, and UNDESA brings together substantive thinking on many of these issues. So how do we, by twinning content with the pedagogy of learning, with the methodology of learning, help change people's attitudes to many of these things? So this was a natural match between UNITAR and DESA, and we're so happy that we are being able to do this together. In UNITAR, we have a platform called UN Climate Change Learn. We also have a platform called UN SDG Learn, where lots of people participate. There's so many UN entities in the UN Climate Change Learn. In UN SDG Learn, we have UN entities, plus academia, plus the private sector. So everybody is contributing to this joint thinking on how we can collectively change things. Through the power of education, our hope is to reach more policymakers, reach more decision makers, reach more students, reach more scholars and individuals who are passionate about our future. where the challenges that were outlined in the Paris Agreement and in the SDGs in that same wonderful year 2015 are achieved. We hope that more institutions, organizations, individuals, private sector actors will join us on this journey to discover and realize the synergies and the call for action for reaching both the goals and ambitions that will come out of COP26 and those that are already established in the framework of goals and targets under the SDGs. So we hope that what you learned today will help you get a better understanding of these commonalities and these ways in which we need to bring change to our rather critically placed world today. Thank you, Naira. Back to you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Seth, for those opening remarks. And I would like to now invite Ms. Lotta Tahtinen. She's the Chief of the Outreach and Partnerships Branch of the Division for Sustainable Development Goals at UNDESA. Lotta, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nayara. Good morning, good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to see so many of you joining today's event. And it's such a particular pleasure for me to be addressing this opening together with Nikhil Seth, who is always a very tough act to follow. As many of you know, Nikhil was, of course, the man behind the scenes who helped member states and stakeholders around the world to craft the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. And Nikhil, thank you so much for providing us, again, as eloquently as always, such a sweeping, broad overview of the SDGs, the climate agenda, how they came to be. I think that introduction was absolutely wonderful. And let me also thank all of our wonderful colleagues from UNITAR for all their close partnership and collaboration in helping us in DESA provide these types of learning opportunities across different critical topics. At this SDG pavilion that is taking place both in hybrid format and in person at COP26, DESA, our department, has been organizing a series of events to bring together experts and policymakers who are leading the implementation of both climate action and SDGs around the world. Let me just flag 2 points building on what Nikhil has already outlined. Firstly, over and beyond all the important action that is required if we are going to be making the SDGs and the Paris Agenda a reality, it's absolutely critical that we have a unified vision, coherent, coordinated, and comprehensive responses from our global multilateral system. And I would just like to draw our participants' attention to the groundbreaking and visionary report that was launched by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres earlier this year in September, called Our Common Agenda, which really sets a vision and charts a path towards a more equal, resilient, and sustainable world in the aftermath of COVID-19 pandemic, and how we can work together to reinvigorate multilateralism. And of course, as you may know, this report really calls for a deepening of the solidarity between people, as of course also with youth and future generations, importantly, based on a renewed social contract that's anchored in human rights, and also a deep understanding of the need to more effectively manage our critical global commons and public goods, including the climate. Let me draw your attention to 2 absolutely critical events, conferences that are about to unfold next year. Firstly, we will have the 2nd UN Ocean Conference held in Lisbon, Portugal, next year in June. And there will also be the United Nations Water Conference in 2023, which both come at this absolutely critical time when the world is looking to strengthen efforts to mobilize, create and drive solutions to tackle climate change and make the SDGs a reality by 2030. And I would like to invite you all to follow closely these processes as well. So let me just conclude by saying that it's clear that the massive challenges we are facing today cannot be solved by governments alone. Instead, we really do need the contributions of all sectors, from private sector, civil society, local governments, the scientific and technological community, youth, and all others. So in this connection, today, UNITAR and DESA are launching a free online course on leaving no one behind in the implementation and follow-up of the 2030 agenda, which discusses and showcases approaches, innovative tools, and best practices on how governments, UN system, and other actors can promote more meaningful engagement of vulnerable stakeholders in times of crisis. This course is open and free to all interested stakeholders, and I hope it will be of interest to many of you. So let me just conclude by saying and thanking all our colleagues who are organizing this event again today. We hope that all our participants will find the information that will be shared with you useful in your own work and efforts. I thank you.
Thank you so very much, Lotta, and many thanks to you and Mr. Seth again for your opening remarks. Colleagues, we do have a very tight agenda, and we shall start with our first panel about harnessing climate and SDG synergies. And there will be three colleagues speaking. Let me first welcome Mr. David Korani. He's consultant for energy policy analysis at the Sustainable Energy Team in the Division for Sustainable Development Goals, UNDESA. And then after David, I'll be inviting my UNITAR colleagues, Mr. Pelayo Alvarez, Ms. Program and Communications Coordinator, and Ms. Tiani Zhao, she's Program Consultant. So David, the floor is yours, and then Pelayo and Tiani, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nayara. It's a great pleasure to join this webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And it's really fantastic to see such a great turnout, both in person at the SDG Pavilion at COP26 and of course online as well. Let me first join Lotta in expressing our gratitude for the excellent collaboration with UNITAR on all this body of work that's been implemented in the past year and that's still to come. On behalf of UNDESA, working closely, of course, with UNFCCC, I had the privilege to participate in the preparations for and the running of the first global UN Climate and SDG Synergies conference that was held in Copenhagen in 2019 that got this whole thing started. And I worked on the summary report jointly with my colleagues at UNFCCC as the outcome report of their conference. And of course, we wanted to do a second one because there seemed to be such an overwhelming demand for such a convening. But unfortunately, COVID prevented us from doing so in 2020. So instead, we did a series of virtual Synergies consultations in May and June last year and pulled together a technical summary report of those. And of course, these two laid the groundwork for the joint UNITAR UNDESA Synergies training courses, the main outcomes of which were captured in the synthesis report. So for the purposes of today's discussion, I was asked to just very briefly highlight a few key takeaways, headline messages, if you like, from the first Synergies conference, from the virtual consultations, and especially from the synthesis report of the learning course. So let me get right down to it. Number one, leveraging climate and SDG synergies is key to a better and stronger recovery from the pandemic. Economic stimulus investments have the potential to promote longer-term goals for climate protection and sustainable development, and in addition, build greater resilience to future crises. But if not planned carefully, they could end up supporting or locking in climate damage and unsustainable practices. And so far, and rather unfortunately, it appears that if you are not squandering, but at least underutilizing this opportunity, and that's attested by a number of reports in the past few months, including UNEP's report on stimulus funding and just a small minority of it going into green investments. So thus, going forward, it would be particularly important to focus our pandemic recovery investments into what the synthesis report, so-called Nexus Clusters, and the synthesis report identified 6 of those. First, the agriculture, food and climate nexus. Second, the energy, water and climate nexus. Third, the air pollution, health and climate nexus. Fourth, the urban development, transport, construction and climate nexus. Fifth, the sustainable consumption, production, waste and climate nexus. And last, the forestry, desertification, biodiversity and climate nexus. And what the synthesis report also did is it identified a series of very concrete synergistic so-called breakout opportunities in these 6 areas, such as promotion of healthy food supplies and plant-based diets, clean water systems to prevent disease, clean cooking solutions, support systems for vulnerable energy consumers, tapping into the great potential of telemedicine solutions, research on potential medicines from the oceans, creating bike lanes for healthy, non-polluting local transportation, building markets for sustainable local food products, and promoting urban farming, among many others. Point number 2, the importance of means of implementation cannot be overemphasized. So capacity building, which this very series of seminars is about, or mobilizing financing and monitoring are especially keys to success. And mitigation and adaptation actions in developing countries require resources well beyond the currently available, and in particular in least developed and low-income, landlocked and small island developing states. So to help build an equitable fiscal space, we will need in particular focus on improving the availability, volume, coverage, and access to financial sources, improving the coordination among stakeholders, development banks, multilateral funds, national funds, aid agencies, and private companies, and of course, boost private investments to greater policy and regulatory certainty, and enhance national arrangements and coordination systems. And last but not least in this category, we should more closely monitor the impacts of policies, and to demonstrate synergies, we need to create platforms for targeted data collection and develop indicators or interlinkages to capture the multiplicator effects better. And then last but not least, more effective technology development and technology transfer is critical for addressing current and future synergy challenges. Countries will require more robust international support for implementing and diffusing prioritized technologies, mostly in the energy, agriculture, forestry, land use, and water sectors. So to conclude, let me highlight another conference in 2022, which is going to be the 3rd Global Synergies conference that will most likely take place in March in Japan, in collaboration with the government of Japan, again, jointly co-organized with by UNDESA and UNFCCC. That will focus on action and implementation at the global, regional, country, and local level as far as synergistic action is concerned. So with that, back to you, Nayara. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so very much, David. And perhaps if you could share on the chat box the link to the synthesis report you mentioned, and any the links also to the conferences, I think this will be very helpful. Over to my colleagues, Pelayo, Tiani, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nayara. Thank you so much, David, for this wonderful introduction to the topic. We would like to just give for the participants a practical tool that will help us better understand the topic that we are discussing in this section. I would just like to present the e-learning course, Harnessing Climate and SDG Synergies, on behalf of the head of our office, Ambassador Marcos Suazo. UNITAR's mission is to develop the individual individual, institutional, and organizational capacities of countries and other UN stakeholders through high-quality learning solutions and related knowledge products and services that can enhance decision-making and also support the country-level action to overcome global challenges. During this time, UNITAR has proactively adapted to the changing situation and tried to find the best way to tackle these issues. We have incorporated our experience in designing and creating this e-learning course that you will see now on your screen, and I will also drop in the chat for anybody who would like to register and access, which is a multi-module training that will also have an interactive certificate at the end that will give you for those who are able to complete the course. It addresses the synergies between climate and SDGs. And we will just want to mention that this course it's also building on the 2019 Climate and SDG Synergies Conference and the 2021 Synergies Learning Series. It goes into more depth and provides policymakers with tools and evidence that they may be able to use to advocate for climate and synergies in related intergovernmental context. After leaving the link in the chat for those who will be interested in registering, I'm going to just pass the floor to my colleague, Ms. Amy Zhao, who was the designer behind creating this wonderful e-learning course. She will let us know a little bit more about the structure, and then I'll be back to just give a quick overview on how to register to the course. Amy, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. During the past few months, with the significant help from our colleagues from the UNDESA and the UNFCCC, we have developed this e-learning course without meeting each other in person. For me and everyone who has worked on the content, the structure, and the design of the Harnessing Climate and SDG Synergy course, we know all too well that this isn't just another piece of learning material. It is a statement for the always existed, often ignored positive relations between pursuing climate goals and implementing SDGs. It is an attempt to introduce new sustainable business opportunities and possibilities for stakeholders by making the case. And last but not least, it is a toolbox that can be deployed at any time by decision makers and curious individuals to identify and harness climate and SDG interlinkages and eventually become advocates themselves and provide guidance on different industry levels. The course existed to address three main challenges: poverty and inequality, climate change, and the pandemic. And because the universally agreed global vision, Agenda 2030, and the Paris Agreement called for a next level ambition on tackling climate change, we created this course to answer three questions. The why question: why making the case for integrated climate and SDG synergies? The how question: identifying opportunities and trade-offs to maximize synergies. And the what question: what barriers need to be overcome to realize synergies? These three topics are also the three modules that consisted this free, open for all, public available, and UNITAR certificated e-learning course. I will pass the mic to my colleague Palayo again to explain further on how UNITAR can assist you on registering this course, and most importantly, how UNITAR can provide extensive learning resources and platform for you to further study the content and knowledge to contribute your effort in stopping climate change.
Thank you so much, Amy, for that overview of the structure of the course. I will just project very quickly this flip chart that we created for how to register on the course. It is very easy. You can just use the link that we have dropped in the chat, and using that link, you will be able to create an account in our event management system. And you will be also able to log in on our e-learning platform using that same account that you just created. And finally, using the self-enrollment key, climate and SDG, that it has been included also in the chat, you can just copy and paste it. You will be access to all the content on our right. It is very easy to use, very user-friendly. You will be able to see all the different modules on the course, and you will just be clicking through the modules and seamlessly going through all the content of the course. If you have any questions, we are going to drop our email in the chat for you to let us know what can we help you with, if you need any assistance with the registration, and just let you know that the UNITAR staff is here to support you in any way that you may need. With this, we conclude our presentation on the course, but as mentioned, we remain open to any questions that you may have, and we'll pay closely attention to all of you sending comments through the chat.
Thank you so very much, Pelayo, Amy. Also, huge thanks again to David. Colleagues, we have a few minutes to any questions, comments, or suggestions you may have. We do have our chat box and Q&A boxes for those following on Zoom. Please, if you have any questions or suggestions, just indicate your name, your organization, and country. Also, if you are targeting, addressing your question to one of our speakers, if you could indicate whom. While our colleagues are working on the questions, those that are attending online, let me also check our colleagues in the pavilion. Angus, if you see anyone, perhaps we could just take down the slide, and then we can spotlight our colleagues in the pavilion to see if there are any questions there. And Angus, perhaps you can support us from there.
So far, nothing live here. So, but if somebody has a question, raise their hand. I'll pass them the microphone.
Okay. We'll also be monitoring here.
Naira?
Yes.
We have one question from the floor here, so I'll pass the microphone. Is that okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Bird with the University of Minnesota, and I teach classes about systems thinking. And I also teach a game design class where we look at synergies between the SDGs. So I'm going to use your materials next semester. I'm so excited. I'm wondering if there was explicit intent about systems thinking in the design of the course.
Thank you so very much for this. Let me go to Amy, Pelayo, if you have, and David, any follow-up to this one?
Sorry, I have a little bit of connection issue. Would you mind repeating the question again?
The question was about the extent to which systems thinking was used in developing the course.
Right. As I mentioned in the previous talk, I might have gone over it a little bit more quickly, but so we looked at the systematic challenges that we are currently tackling as a system. And different module highlighted from examples, case studies to interactive exercises. We try to engage in as many factors as we can from a systematical level. And the first module highlighted a number of contributing factors to support the policymaker in making the case, because we're trying to make this course very easy to access for people who are currently working on related issues. So we're thinking from their perspective, and that's the main audience that we are currently targeting. And the second module includes examples of tools, and also for people to try to even try to use the tools themselves for assessing synergies and co-benefit of integrated policies and actions. And the third module provides insights on some of the main challenges, and we include some of the case studies, and we also dived into some phrases, terms, such as national determined contributors and all that, for people to realize in practice, how can we better fix the challenges that we are facing from a more comprehensive level. So I hope that this answers your question, but we are really trying our best to keep the course short and easy to access for everyone. And there are a bunch of reading materials if you want to go further or to do like further studies. It's always available.
If I may just briefly jump in, Nayara, in my personal capacity responding to the question of Kimberly, I cannot agree more, and I'm very enthusiastic about the potential of gamification in conveying the complexities of synergies or any other policy question, frankly. And in my personal capacity, I've been working on a piece of software, a prototype that targets exactly that. How do you convey the complexities of policymaking in a game-like format? So I will post my email in the chat box, and feel free to reach out. I would love to discuss the opportunities there.
Thank you so very much, David. And yeah, so we can also see ways to keep this connection going. I see, and thank you for sharing your email as well in the chat. And I know colleagues, for colleagues who are in the SDG Pavilion, you can also reach out to our colleagues supporting the Pavilion. They can easily connect you with any of the panelists with us today. I see that we have a few questions coming about, the course. Perhaps, Amy, if you could just reinforce that it's self-paced and that open to all. Correct?
Yep. Yes, it is. It is accessible for free. You don't have to pay any kind of fees, and it is self-paced. So you will be able to do it on your own time without any kind of like deadline or anything. You can just let us know whenever you have completed the course to get your certificate for the course.
Thank you so much. And the same goes for the course that Lotta mentioned in the beginning that we are launching today. We have a new module on leaving no one behind. It's part of the stakeholder engagement course. It's also open, free of charge, and it's open to all interested stakeholders. And there is also a certificate provided by UNITAR. And we have just, is there a minimum criteria for enrollment in the course, colleagues?
No, the course is open to everybody. Obviously, it's more focused on policymakers. However, anybody is welcomed, and anybody could benefit from the course. It is built in such a way that it has from the basis to the top all kind of the approach to be useful for anybody who would like to learn a little bit more about this particular topic.
Perfect. Thank you so
Naira,
much.
we have a request from the floor here that Pelayo, could you post the link to the course on the screen so people can copy it down or take a photograph?
Yes, definitely. We have it in the chat. I'm going to throw it again so you can have it
on the screen,
easily accessible.
Yeah, I think we have a slide.
Yeah.
I think we have a slide we could share there.
Perfect. We will be sending as a follow-up to anybody who has registered. I will also leave my email in case they want to contact us. You can scan that QR code that you see in the screen, and you'll be able to access the course. I feel like for those in the room, that will be the easiest way to access it.
Okay, so colleagues, for those that are following on Zoom, you can keep posting questions and comments on the chat box. Amy, David, Pelayo, they are there. They could also see if there is any follow-up they can make, and they'll be sharing links. But now we should move back to the pavilion and have the more interactive also part of our program with our climate classroom. So let me invite and welcome my colleague, Mr. Angus Mckay, Director of the Division for Planet from UNITAR, and he will be leading this climate classroom. And the theme is changing the language of climate change. So we will be going to Glasgow now, and Angus, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nara. Thanks, colleagues. Yeah, it's interesting, this hybrid style of event. I'm looking up on the screen and I can see most of our participants are online around the world, but we have a small Resolute core here supporting. And of course, we're in the middle of the event. I mean, there's a busy event going on around us. It's very, energizing, which is, I think, one of the reasons why it's so very important that we actually meet face to face. And we missed last year, and I think this human engagement is fundamental. I'm going to start with a quotation that I pulled off the BBC news site during week 1 of COP. And it's from a resident of Glasgow. It's cool to see COP26 here in my city, but I feel a bit detached from it, really. I don't feel particularly involved in it. And that made me feel a bit sad when I read that. But we've probably, all of us in our work, in our jobs, we've probably all noticed this type of reaction to the work that we do on climate change. So Paleo, with that start, if you can go to the next slide, please. Let me introduce myself. So my name is Angus Mckay. I'm the director for the Division for Planet at UNITAR. The Division for Planet is basically all the work that we do on building human capacity on the environment. My grandfather was actually born in this city, and you know, a very long time ago. He was actually born in 1860 in Glasgow. I'm relatively old. My dad was relatively old when I was born. His dad was relatively old when he was born. So suddenly you find your grandfather was born during the reign of Queen Victoria. But it's here, a very, very different Glasgow from today, but it was just as busy and hopeful then as it has become today. That was just a bit about me, nothing really particularly significant. What I want to say is that we're now moving into the climate classroom piece of this event. It's what we call the espresso shot of knowledge, right? So we run 15 or 20 of these classrooms during the 2 weeks of COP. And what we want to do is to convey as much as we can to you in the shortest possible time, because the currency, as we all know, is time. So there'll be a little bit of substance from me, 10, 15 minutes. We'll then have a little example. So we hope that you'll all participate in that, and then some Q&A, and then we'll close. And like any good classroom, we have rules, class rules, right? So firstly, if you're online, please put your cameras on. Please mute your microphones until part 3, and then do raise your hand if you want to speak, and or put your questions in the chat box. I hope we'll get people to actually speak. I hope that will be possible to arrange, Nara. Next slide, please. So what's my pitch? So climate change is a complex issue. We know that. The language that we use is very hard to relate to. We know that too. But we also know that if we're going to solve the complexity, we're going to have to engage a lot more people than are at this COP, or a lot more people than are familiar with the language of climate change, right? It impacts on all of us. Everyone has a role to play. My pitch is about the words that we use. That's really what I want to talk about today. Are we using words that are inclusive? Are we using words that help us transmit that message as far as possible? Are we using the full power of words to save our societies and our planet? Next one, please. So I pulled this out of a textbook on the evolution of human communication, but it's a nice quote. Communicators must share some degree of overlap in culture, language, or environment if people are to communicate at all. Now, Nikhil, in his introductory remarks, talked about the language of the SDGs and that they are inherently more approachable because they have to do with human issues. So part of the answer, I think, is in the language of the SDGs, which have been carefully designed to appeal, well, to the political class, but not only the political class. But it's a fundamental principle that I want to share with you today, and which hopefully will inform our discussion. Next one, please. We love the Pew survey, right? We love the work that they do. It's such a wonderful kind of baseline. And so in 2021, Pew carried out a survey of citizens' views on climate change, basically covering the OECD countries, you know, in advance of COP. It's absolutely fascinating that you take a country like Germany, but not only Germany, but a country like Germany, now 85% of citizens now believe that climate change will personally harm them or affect them during their lifetimes. This was not the case 10 years ago. It really wasn't. Not in the OECD countries. So this is pivotal and very interesting. And of course, in Germany, we just had an election, and there's no question that the environmental agenda, the climate agenda, has played a very significant role. And that's because people now feel personally engaged and that they want solutions that they can understand. Of course, the young adults are the most willing to make their changes, but it's not just the young. Many people across society want to see a change, but it's not really happening fast enough, is it? I mean, that's the issue. Our societies are not changing fast enough. We heard already from many speakers over the last 10 days, this is the case. The recent fiscal stimulus packages to save us from the pandemic have some environmental policies and investment built in, but not enough. So what's happening? Let's go to the next one. So that's it. Could language, is it the language that we use that is slowing down the process of change? Of course, it isn't only the language, but how important a factor could the language that we use be? And now I think about myself, I'm not an activist. I'm unlikely to go and lie down on a motorway to stop the traffic. It's just not in my nature, but I could be an activist in terms of using language in a much more calculating way. You know, have I made the effort to really think through how I'm going to communicate my message to those that I work with clearly? Next, please. So I'm going to give you 3 short examples, and then I'm going to wrap up and we're going to have an exercise. Now, these are examples of ways in which different organizations, different people are trying to use channels of communication that are not normal for climate change, but where a lot of people exchange ideas. And we're trying to use those to bring climate change into those existing channels. We're trying to understand effectively, how do societies share knowledge? How do we learn? But taking it out of this space and putting it into the space that is, to some extent, more intuitive. We're all part of those spaces as well. So I've got 3 examples. The first one is actually the TED Talk, right? TED Talks were not set up for climate change. They were set up to convey good ideas. So why are we not using the TED platform more? We are actually. We are beginning to use it, but there's a very good reason for that, because it communicates in an emotional style that engages people and that your message will therefore travel further. So that's one example. Second one is a great piece of work done by UNDP last year, the People's Climate Vote, and that reached a lot more people because why they use the gaming industry to do so. And the third one is a national example, and I'm kind of hoping, Naira, colleagues, that there may be somebody from Thailand on the call today. If there is, please do comment on what I'm going to say about what happened in Thailand last year. It's a very, very interesting case study. So next slide, we'll go a little bit into detail on these 3, and then we'll move on. So the People's Climate Vote. Yeah, so they used gaming platforms, several gaming platforms, and integrated climate content into those, and essentially used them as a way of asking people, what is their message for policymakers? They got 1.2 million respondents from 50 countries. This is by far the largest climate-related survey that has ever been achieved, right? Why did it reach so many people? Because they used a totally different channel, a much bigger channel than this one here at COP. So under 18s most likely to define climate change as an emergency. Probably a lot of under 18s took part in the survey. But critically, and this is one of the main conclusions, and I find this fascinating and pivotal, those demanding action were the most educated. So if you had tertiary level education, you had university level or above, you were more likely to say, well, we must have action on climate change. And it didn't matter whether you came from France or the Congo, it's the same thing, right? So level of education means I understand the issues more, I'm more engaged. Now that is a big problem. I mean, that actually underlines my point about language, does it not? Because, you know, we're not communicating at an easy and intuitive level. You have to have a university degree or a master's degree or a PhD to actually process some of this content and relate it to our lives and to the lives of others. So it's a fantastic survey, but it actually accentuates the problem that we're facing. Next one, please. So I love this example. It comes from Thailand. I lived in Thailand for many years, and I hope that there are many on the line have as well. And maybe, you know, if you're Thai, you can actually help us understand this. But last year there was a quite high profile invitation for the public to take part in a competition. 1 million baht would be the prize if you could find a better word than climate change that could be used in the Thai language. So at the moment, in the Thai language, climate change is translated in a rather sort of academic way. It's rather a long sentence, and people read it and they basically understand it. It doesn't mean very much. So what they've tried to do is they tried to flip that around. And the winning term, I don't know how many people can figure this one, but I mean, the winning term basically says something like the world is being stirred up, right? So that final word, ruan, means kind of chaotic movement from side to side. And it's, what's interesting about it is it's a word that is used in very, very everyday situations. Like if you're stirring your pot in the kitchen, you stir it round and it's ruan. If somebody keeps changing their mind, you know, oh, one minute you're this, 1 minute you're that, we never know what you're thinking, you are ruan, right? So immediately you connect that idea to the state of the world and you get this visceral, intuitive connection that didn't exist before. And the idea and the concept travels further in society as a result. I think it's a fascinating example. I think it also underlines the fact that probably every society needs to find a way to define what is their optimum term that will travel further so that people can be engaged. And we'll have a little exercise in how this can be done in a moment. Next one, please. I'm nearly done. So this is my personal favorite because on Friday, we will be launching a TEDx event called The Tide is Rising. And it's for youth. It's for young people who've got great ideas using the TED approach, which is, as I said earlier, communicating intuitively, emotionally, engaging you through their own personal experience, using everyday terms and channels to communicate. And you know, it's an experiment for us, but you know, we'll generate some videos from that. But I really think that it would be great if many of our delegates and other spokespeople took a little bit of the TED way of presenting ideas to get it across to those who are not lucky enough, fortunate enough to make it into this event. Thank you. Next one, please. So we'll have a little exercise now. We're going to put up a Slido. Basically, what I want you to do, whether you're here or online, and I think if you're here and you want to contribute, you can just do it through the microphone, or if you have a mobile phone, you can do it as well. If you just pop back that slide, Pele, I just want to underline one point and go back to the previous slide. Yeah, so this is an exercise in trying to find more intuitive language. So the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning, right? If I say climate change adaptation or climate resilience, unless you actually work in that area, you're going to have to say to yourself, well, okay, well, what does that mean? How do I apply? Oh, yeah, okay, I can figure out that in relation to agriculture, what this could mean. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a much more rapid, intuitive, immediate sense of understanding from the terms that we use. So that's what the exercise is about. And if we can have the first question, we can operate the Slido. Thank you, Pelayo. So question one, quite simply, what is your mother tongue? Let's see what comes up.
So we will start sharing the Slido. So colleagues, those that are following online and those in the room, you just need to go to slido.com, or if you can also use the QR code, and then you tap the code 445498. And then let's open the first question. What is your mother tongue? So colleagues, you can start completing and populating, and yes. So Angus, you can see.
Yeah, no, we've got some front runners, but we've got some interesting balance already. I'm looking for Thai. Hausa, look at that. There we go. That's in Chinese, Bangla, Igbo from Nigeria, Irish, Burmese. So we've got quite a balance, quite a large proportion of European languages, as one might expect. We've got quite an interesting range of languages from around the world. Let's give it a couple more moments. Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. Can we move to, let's move to the next question. So, is the term climate change intuitive in your mother tongue? Remember what I said. Do you have to process it to understand what it means, or does it immediately translate in something you could talk to your aunt about, or your granddad, or anyone outside of this space? Okay, so interesting result. Yeah, so about 50% pretty much feel that if you say climate change, yeah, I get that quickly. That's not unexpected, because those online are probably interested in climate change, and some of them probably been to several COPs, and we know what we mean by climate change. We know it's complex. We don't have to process it. But on the other hand, about 40% of those on the call are saying, well, maybe or maybe not, actually. So let's delve a little bit deeper by going to the third question. So this is really difficult, this one. It doesn't matter, you don't have to get it right, but have a go. So what do you think might be a better term for climate change in your mother tongue? One that would be intuitive, that would communicate more quickly, like ruang in Thai. Take a moment, think about it. A lot of interesting ideas coming up. Some of them in scripts or in languages which we can't read. But I would like to explore some of these with those of you online who've been making these excellent contributions. I don't know whether it's possible, Pelayo or colleagues, for us to sort of see more of these. They seem to be scrolling down. All right, let's, I see somebody's written Uwa Bayali, and I wonder who it is who wrote that. And I wonder if you would be able to address us and explain what this term means and why you've included it. And if you can't, then put something in the chat box. But can whoever put that term, Uwa Mbayali, tell us more about why you put that, what it means. Colleagues, you have to let me know if that's feasible, if I've asked for the impossible.
Hi, Angus. We are monitoring the chat. I don't see the colleague who put that that expression. We see someone.
Stirred up world in Igbo. So this is somebody probably from Nigeria. I mean, if it's possible to give them the floor, Naira, can we do that? Because it would be great to hear their voice.
Yes, I think we can. Colleague, can you raise your hand? Can you raise your hand? I
Yes.
can't see the. Oh, here the person is. Colleagues, if we could unmute our colleague to Achike. You have the floor, colleague.
Okay, hi.
Hello. Welcome to COP26.
Thank you. Uwa means the world. Mbayali means like chaos, like confusion. So that was the closest I could come to a description of not being able to understand what's going on, especially with like the rising tide in the ocean, the changing weather patterns, so that it becomes the easiest way to explain to the farmer in the rural area why the rains are more or the rains are coming late and it's affecting his crop, why all of a sudden there is mudslide, there is erosion. You know, there are things that he really can't understand.
And that's fascinating. And is this a term that you are actually using in Nigeria, or is it something that you think should be used? Tell us a bit about the context to this.
Well, I am a student at this time. I reside in Pennsylvania. I'm a master's I'm an MSW student at the University of Pennsylvania. So I made this up just from my clear understanding of my language. I try to put it together the way I would have spoken to my grandmom or just folks in my village in a language that they will understand without making it more difficult. So Uwambali would have been the world in a little cauldron, all stirred up. So it's not the normal pattern you're used to. It will be like too much rain, too little rain, erosion all of a sudden, things just going out of order in the world, to get them to understand that there's a reason why this is going on. So is it things that we are doing? Is it the bushes that we are burning more of? Is it things that we can do differently? And trust me, a lot of people, a lot of folks back home are willing to make these changes if the concept of global change can be simplified to a level that they can understand and appreciate, so that they learn that these little things that you do here and there could actually contribute in little ways to the change in environment that is taking place out there.
Thank you so much. You know, it's not unlike the Thai example, actually, this idea of the world being stirred up and something that people can understand. You know, there's a hell of a lot here, Palayo and Naira. I wonder, you know, can we open the floor for anyone else who would like to take the floor and explain their term? I see Eklim in Pashto. I see you know, some more straightforward explanations in English or Spanish as well. But would anyone else like to contribute their thinking behind why they've put up a particular term in any mother tongue that we have up on the screen? Please raise your hand. Please come in behind.
We have a colleague here, Karib, raising his hand or her hand. Apologies for that.
Go ahead.
I think colleagues might be trying to unmute you, colleague. If you could try to speak.
He should now have the floor if he wishes to speak.
Yes, it's open now. Over to you, colleague.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, this Yeah, hi, this is Karibullah from Kabul, Afghanistan, and currently I'm live from Afghanistan, and we are using the word iklim. It's our local language, it's Pashto, and the translation of the climate change, it means we can also use like Hawaii Badloon. So it is, these words and these expressions are like, we can use interchangeably. So it was in our language.
You know, we're so grateful you've joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm thankful to the UNITAR and also to all these professors and researchers. Thank you.
And you know, how does this idea that you have, these words you've used, how does that, tell us a bit about how that communicates to people in the community, people that you know? I mean, give us a little sense of how words can make a difference in Afghanistan at the moment on climate change.
Well, obviously, you know, we have 4 seasons in a year: winter, summer, autumn, and spring. And here in Afghanistan, the weather is different in each and every season. Currently, winter is about to start, and you know that Afghanistan is one of the countries that poverty is reaching to its peak level. So people, you know, are starving to find something just to put their children, their family in a environment that there should be no freezing, because after a month there will be snowing. So usually people are using this word iklim, that there is you know, change in climate, sudden and unexpected change.
Thank you so much, and
welcome, sir.
We wish you and your close friends and all the you know, all good wishes from COP26 and from colleagues online. Let's have one or two more. Do we have time, Nara?
Well, we have, I think we have 2 more, perhaps. Marcela Rabasa.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Marcela from Caritas Bolivia in Latin America. And the term that I want to share with you is the common house sick. This is the word that we use in the Catholic Church in the light of the Laudato Si encyclic. And this is a term that means that our common house, that our creation, that our space, the unique space that we use for all the creation is sick. And it means in the Catholic Church the similar meaning of climate change, but express our creation, right?
Right. So so in your society, in your culture, in your community, your point is that if it's expressed in this way, more people are going to be willing to listen and try and understand more.
Yeah, in all institutions or ecclesiastic institutions, we use this term, common house sick.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's fascinating, really interesting. And maybe one more before we conclude, Nara.
So we have Mohammed Arif.
Yeah, hello. Hi, I'm Mohammed Arif.
Welcome,
I'm from
Mohammed.
India. Yeah,
welcome.
My native language is Urdu. I'm from India. I'm speaking Urdu. In Urdu, climate change is Maholiyat Aludgi. Maholiyat says word Maholiyat Aludgi means climate change, climate crisis.
And do you feel that it is intuitive? Is it something that everyone can understand in your language, or do you feel that you need to, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Many, yeah, in terms of a very educational institution in Urdu language, in schools of Urdu language, there are subjects in Aludgi Maholiyat. This topic is very a large scale of very chapters and subjects are studied in school and colleges in India, and particular Urdu language school and colleges. So very awareness.
Very good. Thank you for teaching us today through the
No,
climate.
no. Just information. I'm a student. I need more teaching and more learn. So I am joining this platform first time. I am very happy and fortunate at this type of organization. So we are aware internationally. This is good for me, and also thanks all of my colleague and you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Very good. So thank you, Nara. I think we can wrap up maybe the Slido and just move back to the final slide I have. Final two slides. Well, I mean, firstly, I mean, if anyone who's online has any more, general remarks on the issue of changing the language. I mean, obviously it's more than simply changing the terminology for climate change, but in the time that we have today, this is really just to demonstrate the difficulties of conveying a message clearly in 195 countries, and the work that probably has to be done, I think, to activate sort of everyone else, really. But if anyone would like to raise their hand, and not so much in terms of finding a new term for climate change, but more generally would like to comment on this question about the use of language, that would be now would be a time to do it, and we'd be happy to hear from you. Or chat box, if you want to raise a question in chat box, we can try and respond.
Angus, I see we have one person wanting to say something. Evie Tramanza.
Yes, hello everybody. Can you hear me?
Hi Evie. Yeah, we can see you.
I'm not sure how to do my camera. I'm not sure how to do that.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm a librarian and it's lovely to be listening to everybody. I think telling stories can help. Stories of what this means can help the communication forward. And I have a question for you. How can libraries help? Because libraries are in the heart of the communities. I would love to hear about this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, that's excellent. I'll store that one. Nara, if we want to take a couple more, and then I can try and respond, or others can respond as well.
I don't see any hands, and I don't see new things coming through the chat. I wonder if there is anyone in person.
Otherwise, whilst we're waiting, I mean, yeah, libraries. I must confess, I don't have a straight off the bat answer. What I can say is that, yes, you're absolutely right. Libraries are in communities. They are sort of a known meeting place. They are a place where children go a lot, and the education system uses. My kids use libraries a lot. They're places of calm and quiet, of reflection. So all of these things, I think, are big plus points. But I guess where I'm not so sure, and maybe you can help us, is, how have libraries changed? I mean, since I was a child, I think libraries have changed a lot. They probably offer a whole range of other services that could be helpful here. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think libraries can be transformational. I think post offices can be transformational. It's about having the creativity and to use what we have to communicate to more. That would be my response. But happy to hear from you on libraries as well, what your ideas are.
Before I go back to our colleague, I see that we have Marco Suazo from our partner UNITAR in New York. Marco, please, perhaps you can.
Glad you could join us.
Marco, you are still muted. You're still almost.
Yeah, I think you're still muted, Marco. Press that button somewhere on your screen. All right, let's go on. Naira, we'll come back to Marco as soon as he unmutes.
We don't have any addition. Let me see. Let me just go back.
There was a question about libraries in remote communities, and I mean, you know, it depends on which country you're talking about, really. I mean, in some countries you have mobile libraries that move around precisely to reach more remote areas, but obviously that's not going to be available in all societies and all communities. But I think the question of libraries, you know, raises a much larger point. You know, what do we actually have at our disposal that we can better use to communicate clearly on climate change? So let me wrap up. Pelayo, you can go back to the previous slide. I've got 3 concluding points, and then we can. So, you know, there's no question that we need to have one language of science and to some extent of diplomacy, because, you know, it would be extremely confusing if we had 195 different sciences of climate change. So, you know, what goes on in this space here at COP, you know, don't misunderstand me, it's vitally important. And those that take part in these discussions need to have a high level understanding of all of this. So that's absolutely clear. There is no place for fake information or fake news on this. And yet, when it comes to action, and this is what we hear, COP26, we must have action. I think there are multiple languages and channels. So whilst we have one language of science and diplomacy, Marco, I'll bring you in right at the end so you can make a comment. We have one language of science and diplomacy, we must have multiple languages of action. You know, what does it take to motivate you and change your behaviors through language? And, you know, so, you know, I think that's really the point I want to make, is that climate change has to be made more relatable to all of us. It must be made more inclusive. If you go back to the lady from Glasgow that I referred to at the beginning, it's cool to see COP26 here in my city, but I feel a bit detached from it, really. I don't really feel particularly involved. That's no good, right? We've got to change that. We've got to find ways of being inclusive. We have to make the extra effort to use these different channels, these different terms. And I hope that we can come back next year, as we've got some projects in mind, to try and demonstrate even more clearly how this can be done based on good ideas. So my final request to you all, in thanking you for taking part, final slide, Elayo, please. Drum roll. Think about it. Pelayo, if you want, Marco, if you'd like to add something, then please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Angus. Thank you very much for all participants and for all the team of UNITAR in New York also with them for putting this together. I just sorry to I'm not so savvy on electronics, so I was able to unmute one device. I have to switch it. But I just wanted to make a comment on the previous presentation about the terminology. Absolutely right about that, because there is not only the need to engage from my own perspective. This is a very personal comment. I have a language because I was educated 20, 30 years ago, maybe more. But the new generations need to understand better in their own language. But it's not only an issue of changing a word or changing phrases or logos. It's also an issue to change the narrative. I have witnessed it so many times in the United Nations negotiations that there is this sense of making somebody guilty, making somebody responsible. And that creates, per se, a kind of confrontation and doesn't allow consensus to be reached. And this issue is not about who is responsible or who is the one who has to take the tag of paying the bill. This is a common problem for everyone, rich, poor, developed, underdeveloped. And I think we have to also look not only to that, to the narrative in which we produce documentations and papers and analysis. And one lady was mentioning before that we have to tell stories, and that's the truth. We have to tell stories from every single part of the world, every single challenge, but also the narrative has to be enhanced in a way. There is no guilty, there is no responsibles. We are living in the same house, and we are all responsible for the house. So I just wanted to add that very personal comment, and thank you all of you for being part of this. And Angus, remarkable presentation, moderation, and everything. Thank you very much. I will be behind from New York all the time, you know that, but thank you for today. It was really rich.
Thank you so much, Marco. Very glad that you could wrap up, and very excellent point to finish. So with that, let me hand back to you, Naira, from COP26.
Thank you so very much, Angus, and to all my colleagues. I see some additional inputs coming up, but let us invite you to do an exercise with us. If my colleagues could share the slide about the Padlet. We have been talking about language. So if you could go to, for those who are in the pavilion, you can use the QR code, or you can use the bit.ly that is showing on your screen. My colleagues will also be sharing the link here with those on the Zoom. We want to invite you to leave a message in your mother tongue for COP 2016 at the Padlet. As please go and start assessing. If you have issues to do that, please do flag to my colleagues. They will also try to support you. And please be mindful as well with the languages that we'll be adding. But we will go back to that before we close. I'll just go to some of the comments we got to the chat box. So someone was saying the importance of talking about the co-benefits of strategies to tackle climate change. For example, how CO2 reductions lead to decreased rate of asthma. So this could be a way to get to broader audiences and to connect to them. Also, someone was saying that perhaps we could focus on the term uso inteligente, or intelligent use or smart use of the environment. I don't know, or of our commodities, perhaps. So someone also brought some inputs here, talking about how older generations observe and also name the changes in climate in their environment. So someone saying that in Kenya, an elderly man said that the air is drying. And someone saying that her grandmother in Bulgaria said that the plant's growth is twisted. So they don't need to see the temperature records, but they can express how this is shown in their realities. So I think, yeah, so I see a lot of inputs coming. Let me just go back to see how our Padlet is coming. Messages are showing. Let me see. Yeah, I don't know if colleagues are able to access the Padlet. I'll give you a few more minutes. Angus, let me go back to you for some final remarks. And before we close, we will show unable to access. I wonder, colleagues managing the Padlet. I see a few are managing to put the messages. But let me go back to Angus, where we try to solve the Padlet. Angus, for your final remarks.
Well, I think you've probably heard enough from me, but I mean, let me just come back to where we are now here in Glasgow. I mean, Glasgow is not a city that everyone in the world knows about today. And sitting on the bus going back to my lodgings last night, I was overhearing someone saying, yeah, Glasgow, G-L-A-S, you know, spelling it out. But 100 years ago, 150 years ago, when my grandfather was born here, as I said, it was at the heart of what became known as the Industrial Revolution. And the Clyde River that it sits on both sides of the Clyde River was the center of the British shipbuilding industry at a time, a very different time in history. And it's such a message of, you know, of hope really for the future, that Glasgow is and has redefined its position in the world as a center for European arts some years ago, but now as the city of COP26 and everything that goes with that in terms of youthful hope for the future, very different from the industrial revolution of the past, which was also dynamic at its time. So, you know, I think, you know, you're right, Marco, that we need a positive narrative. I think it's a balance, because also we need to hold ourselves as individual citizens to account. You know, it's not just about holding politicians to account, it's about holding ourselves to account. And I'm thinking all the time about how I can do better as an individual to sort of, you know, walk the talk, as it were. But I think Glasgow has been an inspirational place to have this COP. And, you know, I just keep thinking about this resident who said she wasn't connected. I would like to reach out to her in some way and say, well, we want you to be connected. We want you to be involved in this, and thank you for hosting us. But let me hand back on that note to you, Nara.
Thank you so very much, Angus. And with this, let me also thank all our colleagues that are joining us from COP26. We are about to close. Let me just take this moment and ask our colleagues to quickly share the outcomes of the Padlet. I see colleagues, some messages are coming through. We will be keeping this link open for a little longer, so you can come in and join and see if you can add your comments, your messages. Yeah, so we can see this is popping up. And with that, let me say that we have now reached the end of our Sustainable Development Goals and Climate Change Learning and Practice Opportunities. And let me thank you very, very much for joining and participating in this event from wherever you are in the world, or in whatever language you speak from your heart, or you speak when you are working as well. And so to find out more about the event, so you can visit our webpage. We will be sharing the link on the chat box. If you are on Twitter, you can keep following us at SustDev and also at UNITAR. If you use the hashtag SDG Pavilion, you will also be able to see what my colleagues are up to there at Glasgow. And there is also the webpage of the UNDESA SDG Pavilion at COPs 2016, and a lot is coming up over there that you can also follow. Let me take also this opportunity to thank a huge thank you to my colleagues at UNITAR for all the partnership and support in organizing this event today, to all our participants joining us, and especially to my colleagues from UNDESA for the collaboration and contribution and partnership. This meeting is now closed. Thank you so